Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked at the long line of customers waiting at his desk. The Intergalactic Financial Center in Neo Francisco was always busy on Thursday mornings. Aliens from 12 different star systems came here to do their banking. Jake had been working as a teller for 3 years now, and he thought he had seen everything. The tall blue Centaurian at the front of his line finished his business and walked away. Jake called out "Next," and watched as a human man stepped forward. The man looked to be in his 40s, with messy brown hair and a beard that needed trimming. He wore old jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and carried a worn leather wallet that looked like it had seen better days. Jake sighed quietly. Another broke human, he thought to himself. It was always the same story. Humans would come in asking for small loans or trying to cash tiny paychecks. Ever since Earth joined the galactic community 50 years ago, most humans struggled to keep up with the advanced alien economies. "How can I help you today?" Jake asked, not bothering to hide his bored tone. The man smiled politely. "Hi there. I need to check my account balance and make a withdrawal, please." Jake noticed the man's voice was soft and calm. He seemed different from the usual desperate humans who came through his line. But his clothes told a different story. This guy probably had maybe a few hundred credits in his account at most. "Sure thing," Jake said, pulling up his holographic display. "What's your account number?" The man reached into his old wallet and pulled out a banking card. The card looked ancient by galactic standards. It was one of the old Earth-issued cards from the early days of interstellar banking. Jake almost laughed. These old cards usually belonged to people who opened accounts with 10 credits and never added much to them. As Jake took the card, he glanced over at his colleague Vextar, a Centaurian who worked at the next desk. Vextar's blue skin always seemed to shimmer under the bank's lights. His large black eyes could see things humans couldn't, and his species was known for being excellent with numbers and money. "Another human with an ancient card," Jake whispered to Vextar in Galactic Standard, the common language used in space. "Probably wants to withdraw his last 50 credits. Vextar made a clicking sound that was the Centaurian version of laughter. "Your species always seems to live paycheck to paycheck," he replied quietly. "It is quite amusing how Earth beings handle money." Jake nodded and turned back to his customer. The man was patiently waiting, looking around the bank with interest. He seemed to be studying the different alien customers and the high-tech equipment. Most broke humans looked nervous or embarrassed when they came in. This man just looked curious. "This might take a moment," Jake said, sliding the card into his reader. "The old Earth cards are slow to process." "No problem," the man replied. "I'm not in a hurry." Jake tapped his fingers on his desk while the ancient system tried to connect to the main banking network. He wondered what this guy did for work. Probably some low-level job at one of the human districts. Maybe he worked in food service or basic maintenance. Those were the kinds of jobs most humans could get in the galactic economy. The other species had such advanced technology and education systems. Humans were still catching up after being isolated on Earth for so long. The Draconians had faster-than-light travel for over 1,000 years. The Centaurians had been trading across the galaxy for centuries. The Crystalline Collective had mastered energy manipulation long before humans even invented electricity. Humans were the new kids in the galaxy, and everyone knew it. Finally, the system beeped, indicating the account had loaded. Jake looked down at his screen, expecting to see a small balance. Maybe this guy would surprise him and have 1,000 credits. That would be impressive for a human. Jake's eyes went wide. He blinked hard and looked at the screen again. The numbers didn't change. He felt his heart start beating faster. The account balance showed 847,234,891 galactic credits. Jake's mouth fell open. He stared at the screen, sure that there had been some kind of mistake. Maybe the old card had connected to the wrong account. Maybe the system had glitched. There was no way this ordinary-looking human had nearly 1 billion credits in his account. But as Jake looked closer, he saw that the account wasn't just showing a large balance. There were investment portfolios listed, stock holdings in 12 different star systems, real estate on multiple planets, patents and licensing agreements that generated millions of credits every month. Is everything okay? The man asked gently. He had noticed Jake's shocked expression. Jake tried to speak, but no words came out. He looked up at the man again, seeing him completely differently now. This wasn't some broke human looking for spare change. This was one of the richest beings in the galaxy, standing in his line wearing old clothes and carrying a beat-up wallet. Jake stammered. Sir, your account shows. It shows ... A decent amount, I hope, the man said with a small smile. I'd like to withdraw 50,000 credits if that's possible. I have a small project I need to fund. 50,000 credits. The man was calling 50,000 credits a small withdrawal. Jake made about 30,000 credits per year at his job. This human was casually asking for nearly twice Jake's annual salary like it was pocket change. Vexstar noticed Jake's strange behavior and leaned over to look at the screen. When the Centaurian saw the account balance, his large black eyes grew even larger. He made a series of rapid clicking sounds that other Centaurians would recognize as extreme surprise. Jake, Vexstar whispered in Galactic Standard. Look at the account name. Jake focused on the top of the screen where the account holder's name was displayed. It read, Dr. Kevin Reynolds, Ph.D., Quantum Physics, Earth University. Dr. Kevin Reynolds. Jake had heard that name before, but he couldn't remember where. It sounded familiar, like something he might have read in the news or heard on the galactic information networks. Everything all right over there? Called out Klefmer, the branch manager. He was a draconian, tall and imposing with dark green, scaled skin and golden eyes. Klefmer always looked down on the human employees, believing his species was naturally superior at handling money and business. Jake realized that other customers in line were starting to stare. The crystalline being behind Kevin was making soft humming sounds that indicated impatience. A family of Andromedans was shifting their weight from foot to foot. Yes, sir, Jake called back to his manager, trying to keep his voice steady. Just processing a large withdrawal. Kevin Reynolds remained calm through all of this. He stood quietly, hands folded in front of him, waiting for Jake to finish his work. He didn't seem bothered by the delay or the attention he was starting to attract. Jake's mind was racing. Who was this man? How did he have so much money? And why did he dress like he shopped at thrift stores if he could afford to buy entire planets? More importantly, Jake realized with growing horror, he had just made fun of this incredibly wealthy customer to his alien colleague. If Kevin had understood Galactic Standard, he would have heard Jake's dismissive comments about humans and money. Jake's hands shook slightly as he began processing the withdrawal request. 50,000 credits was going to require manager approval and additional security protocols. This simple transaction was about to become much more complicated, and Jake had this sinking feeling that his day was about to get a lot more interesting. Jake's hands trembled as he tried to process Kevin's withdrawal request. The security system immediately flagged the transaction for manager approval because of the large amount. A bright red warning appeared on his screen. Large withdrawal. Requires supervisor authorization. Kevin noticed Jake's nervous behavior and gave him a reassuring smile. Take your time, he said softly. I know 50,000 is a bit more than usual. A bit more than usual. Jake almost laughed at how casually Kevin talked about money that could buy a small spaceship. Jake pressed the button to call his manager, hoping his voice wouldn't crack. When he explained the situation, Klefmer approached the desk with his usual arrogant walk. The draconian manager was nearly 7 feet tall, with dark green scales that gleamed under the bank's lights. His golden eyes looked down at Jake with obvious annoyance. "What seems to be the problem, Morrison?" Clefmer asked in his deep, rumbling voice. He barely glanced at Kevin, dismissing him as just another unimportant human customer. "Sir, Mr. Reynolds here wants to withdraw 50,000 credits, Jake said, trying to sound professional. The system flagged it for approval. Clefmer snorted, a sound that came out like steam from his dragon-like nostrils. 50,000? What human has 50,000 credits? He looked at Kevin with obvious disbelief. "Sir, are you sure you have the right account number? Perhaps you meant 50 credits? Kevin remained perfectly calm. "No, 50,000 credits. For a small research project I'm funding." "Research project?" Clefmer laughed, a harsh sound that made other customers turn to look. What could a human possibly research that would require 50,000 credits? Jake winced at his manager's rude tone. Even if Kevin wasn't wealthy, treating customers this way was wrong. But knowing what Jake now knew about Kevin's account balance, Clefmer's behavior was about to become a very expensive mistake. Perhaps. "You should check his account balance first, sir," Jake suggested quietly. Clefmer waved his clawed hand dismissively. "I don't need to waste time checking. No human customer has that kind of money." He looked directly at Kevin with contempt. "Sir, I suggest you go to one of the smaller banks in the human district. They might be more suited to handle your limited financial needs." Kevin's expression didn't change, but Jake saw something flicker in his eyes. It wasn't anger exactly, but maybe disappointment. Like he had expected this kind of treatment and was tired of dealing with it. "I'd prefer to complete my transaction here, if possible," Kevin said politely. "I've been banking with this institution for 15 years. 15 years. Jake realized that meant Kevin had opened his account right after Earth joined the galactic community. He had been one of the first human customers at this bank. Vexstar, who had been listening to the conversation, finally spoke up. "Clefmer, perhaps you should look at the account information. The balance appears to be quite substantial." The draconian manager glared at the Centaurian. "Don't tell me how to do my job, Vexstar." But curiosity got the better of him, and he leaned over to look at Jake's screen. Clefmer's golden eyes widened. When he saw the numbers, his scales seemed to lose some of their shine as the color drained from his face. For several seconds, he just stared at the screen in complete silence. This ... "This must be an error," he finally stammered. "The system has obviously malfunctioned." Jake pulled up Kevin's full account profile to show there was no mistake. The screen displayed not just the massive balance, but also Kevin's transaction history. Regular deposits of millions of credits every month. Investment portfolios worth hundreds of millions more. Property ownership records spanning multiple star systems. But it was the next piece of information that made Jake's heart nearly stop. At the top of the profile, under Occupation, it listed, Inventor, Quantum Navigation Systems, Quantum Navigation Systems. Jake knew exactly what that meant, and suddenly he remembered where he had heard the name Kevin Reynolds before. "Oh, no," Jake whispered, loud enough for Kevin to hear. Kevin tilted his head slightly. "Something wrong? You're the Kevin Reynolds," Jake said, his voice barely audible. "You invented the quantum navigation drive." Kevin nodded modestly. "Among other things, yes." Vexstar made a series of rapid clicking sounds that indicated extreme shock. Even Clefmer, despite his arrogance, knew what the quantum navigation drive was. Every single spaceship, space station, and interstellar probe in the galaxy used some version of Kevin's technology. The quantum navigation drive had revolutionized space travel 50 years ago. Before Kevin's invention, faster-than-light travel was slow, dangerous, and extremely expensive. Only the most advanced alien species could afford it. Kevin's breakthrough made FTL travel safe, fast, and affordable for everyone. Every time someone traveled between star systems, they paid licensing fees for Kevin's patents. Every time a cargo ship delivered goods across the galaxy, Kevin earned money from his invention. Every time the military fleets of any species used FTL travel, they were using Kevin's technology. Jake realized that Kevin Reynolds wasn't just rich. He was probably one of the wealthiest individuals in the entire galaxy. His invention had made modern interstellar civilization possible. "Sir," Klethmer said, his voice completely changed now. Gone was the arrogant tone. He sounded nervous, almost frightened. "Dr. Reynolds, I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience. Please allow me to handle your transaction personally." Kevin shook his head gently. "Thank you, but Mr. Morrison here seems perfectly capable of helping me. I'd prefer to continue with him." Jake felt a mix of gratitude and terror. Kevin was giving him a chance to fix the situation, but Jake wasn't sure he could handle the pressure. He was processing a transaction for one of the most important people in galactic history. "Right away, Dr. Reynolds," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. He began the authorization process for the 50,000 credit withdrawal. As he worked, Jake's mind raced with questions. Why did Kevin dress so simply if he could afford anything he wanted? Why did he choose to bank at a regular branch instead of using the premium services reserved for ultra-wealthy clients? And why was he being so patient with their rude treatment? Other customers in the bank had started to notice the commotion. A group of crystalline beings were humming together in their musical language, probably discussing what they were witnessing. The Andromedan family had moved closer, clearly curious about what was happening. Word was spreading through the bank that something unusual was occurring at Jake's desk. Other tellers had stopped their work to watch. Even some of the security guards had moved into position to get a better view. Jake completed the withdrawal authorization and printed out the transaction receipt. Kevin's account balance barely changed. 50,000 credits was like pocket change to him. "There you go, Dr. Reynolds," Jake said, handing over the credits and the receipt. "Is there anything else you need today?" Kevin looked at the receipt and smiled. "Actually, yes, I'm curious about something." He looked directly at Jake with kind but serious eyes. "Earlier, when I first approached your desk, what did you think when you saw me?" Jake felt his face turn red. He knew Kevin was asking about his dismissive attitude and the comments he had made to Vexstar. Even though Kevin probably hadn't understood the galactic standard conversation, he had clearly picked up on Jake's behavior. I made assumptions," Jake admitted quietly. "But based on your appearance, I was wrong and I'm sorry." Kevin nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think other humans get treated the same way when they come here?" The question hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. He realized that if Kevin, one of the most important humans in the galaxy, was being treated with disrespect, then ordinary humans probably faced much worse treatment. "Probably," Jake said honestly. "That's something worth thinking about," Kevin said gently. He picked up his credits and tucked them into his old wallet. "Thank you for your help today, Mr. Morrison." As Kevin turned to leave, Jake felt like this encounter had changed something fundamental about how he saw the world. But he had no idea that this was just the beginning, and that Kevin's simple transaction was about to set in motion events that would transform the entire galactic banking system. Kevin walked toward the exit, but Jake noticed he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he stopped to help an elderly Andromedan woman who was struggling with one of the automated banking terminals. Even after being treated rudely, Kevin was still taking time to help other customers. Jake watched in amazement as one of the richest beings in the galaxy patiently showed the woman how to use the machine, speaking to her with the same gentle respect he had shown everyone else. Kevin's transaction should have been simple, but the 50,000 credit withdrawal required additional security checks. While the bank's systems processed the paperwork, Kevin found himself waiting in the customer service area. Jake nervously asked him to have a seat while they completed the final authorization steps. As Kevin sat down, a woman in a security uniform approached him. She was human, probably in her 30s, with short black hair and alert brown eyes. Her name tag read, Lisa Chun, security officer. "Excuse me," Lisa said quietly, "but aren't you Dr. Kevin Reynolds?" Kevin looked up and smiled. "Yes, I am. Have we met?" Lisa's face lit up with excitement. "No, sir, but I've read about your work in the Scientific Journal of Galactic Innovation. I have a degree in physics from Mars University. Your paper on quantum field manipulation changed how I think about space-time." Jake, who was still processing Kevin's transaction, couldn't help but listen to their conversation. He was learning more about this mysterious customer with every passing minute. "You studied physics?" Kevin asked with genuine interest. "What brought you to security work?" Lisa sat down in the chair next to Kevin. "Well, the job market for human physicists is pretty tough. Most research positions go to Centaurians or crystalline beings. They have better mathematical abilities than humans, or at least that's what everyone believes." Kevin nodded thoughtfully. "I faced similar challenges when I was starting out. Most of the established scientific community didn't take human research." "Seriously? Really?" Lisa seemed surprised. "But you're famous across the galaxy now." "That wasn't always the case," Kevin said. "When I first published my theories about quantum navigation, the Galactic Science Council rejected my papers 3 times. They said human science was too primitive to contribute anything meaningful." Jake found himself drawn deeper into the conversation. He had never heard this side of the story before. The official histories always made it sound like Kevin's invention was immediately recognized as brilliant. "What changed their minds?" Lisa asked. Kevin chuckled. "I built a working prototype in my garage on Earth, used parts I bought from a junkyard and equipment I borrowed from my local community college. When I proved that my quantum drive could move a small ship across the solar system in minutes instead of months, they had to pay attention." A small crowd had begun to gather around them. Other bank employees were pretending to work while listening to Kevin's story. Even some of the alien customers seemed interested in what the famous human inventor was saying. "The funny thing is," Kevin continued, "the Draconian Empire had been trying to solve the same problem for over 200 years. They had teams of their best scientists working on it, but they were approaching it all wrong. They were trying to make their existing technology more powerful, while I was thinking about the problem completely differently." Vextar, who had finished with his own customers, walked over to join the group. "Dr. Reynolds, if you don't mind me asking, what made you think differently than the Draconian scientists?" Kevin looked at the Centaurian banker with interest. "That's a good question. I think it came from my background. I grew up poor on Earth. My family couldn't afford the latest technology, so I learned to fix things instead of replacing them. I learned to work with what I had instead of what I wished I had. The Draconian scientists had unlimited budgets and the most advanced equipment in the galaxy," Kevin explained. "But that actually worked against them. They kept trying to build bigger, more complex machines. I was working in a garage with basic tools, so I had to find simpler solutions." Lisa leaned forward. "So being limited actually helped you?" "Exactly," Kevin said. "Humans have always been good at finding creative solutions to problems. We have to be. We're newer to the galactic community, so we don't have the same resources as the older species. That forces us to think outside the box." Jake was fascinated by this conversation. He had never thought about human advantages before. At the bank, he always felt like humans were behind everyone else. The aliens seemed smarter, more advanced, more capable. But Kevin was suggesting that human limitations might actually be strengths. "Can I ask you something, Dr. Reynolds?" Jake called out from his desk. "Why do you dress so Normally? I mean, you could afford anything you wanted. Kevin looked down at his old jeans and plain t-shirt. These clothes are comfortable. They're practical. Why would I need anything fancier? But you're one of the richest people in the galaxy, Jake said. Don't you want to show that? Why would I want to show off my money? Kevin asked genuinely. I didn't invent the quantum drive to get rich. I did it because I thought it could help people. The money is just a side effect. Klefmer, who had been listening from across the room, finally approached the group. The draconian manager looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to say something, but wasn't sure how to begin. Dr. Reynolds, Klefmer said formally, I want to apologize again for my earlier behavior. I didn't recognize you, and I made assumptions that were inappropriate. Kevin looked at the tall draconian with patient eyes. Apology accepted. But I'm curious, would you have treated me better if I had been wearing expensive clothes? Klefmer hesitated. Well, perhaps. Appearance does tend to indicate economic status. But that's not always true, is it? Kevin asked gently. Some of the most important discoveries in galactic history have come from people who didn't look important. Some of the most valuable customers might not dress the way you expect. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the implications of what Kevin was saying. How many other wealthy humans had been treated poorly at this bank? How many important customers had taken their business elsewhere because of discriminatory treatment? Dr. Reynolds, Lisa said, can I ask what your $50,000 credit withdrawal is for? You mentioned a research project. Kevin's eyes lit up with excitement. I'm funding a new initiative to develop instantaneous communication technology. Right now, even the fastest galactic communication systems have delays measured in hours or days. I think I can reduce that to 0. The room went completely silent. Instantaneous communication across the galaxy would be the biggest breakthrough since Kevin's own quantum navigation system. It would revolutionize everything from commerce to diplomacy to military operations. Is that even possible? Vextar asked in amazement. I believe so, Kevin said. The theoretical foundation is solid. I just need to build some prototypes and run some tests. Jake finished processing the withdrawal and walked over to hand Kevin his credits. Sir, who are you working with on this project? Kevin smiled. That's the interesting part. I'm not working with any of the major galactic powers. The Draconian Empire offered me unlimited funding, but they wanted to control the technology. The Zenturian Trade Federation made a similar offer. Even the Crystalline Collective approached me. So who are you working with? Lisa asked. A group of young scientists from different species that have been overlooked by the major powers, Kevin explained. Humans, yes, but also some brilliant researchers from the Andromedan colonies, the Outer Rim settlements, and the independent station networks. The species that don't have political power, Jake realized. Exactly, Kevin said. The same species that often get dismissed or ignored by the banking system, the research institutions, and the galactic government. The species that have to be creative because they don't have unlimited resources. Kevin stood up and tucked his credits into his old wallet. You know, I've been thinking about switching banks. Several institutions have been offering me premium services and better treatment. Jake felt panic rise in his chest. Losing Kevin's account would be a disaster for the bank. Not just because of his personal wealth, but because of what it would signal to other potential customers. Dr. Reynolds, Klefmer said urgently, surely we can work something out. We value your business highly, do you? Kevin asked. Because an hour ago, you were trying to send me to a smaller bank in the human district. You said this institution wasn't suited to handle my limited financial needs. Klefmer's scales turned a darker shade of green, which Jake had learned was a sign of embarrassment in Draconians. I made a mistake, a serious error in judgment. Yes, you did, Kevin agreed. But the question is, What are you going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Not just to me, but to other customers who might not look like what you expect. A wealthy client to look like. Jake realized that Kevin wasn't just talking about changing banks for himself. He was challenging the entire system that had led to this situation. Kevin had the power and influence to force real change, and he seemed determined to use it. What would you suggest? Jake asked, surprising himself with his boldness. Kevin looked at him approvingly. That's the right question to ask. I have some ideas, but I'd like to hear what you think first. You work here every day. You see how customers are treated. What changes would make the biggest difference? Jake felt the weight of the moment. Kevin Reynolds, one of the most important people in the galaxy, was asking for his opinion. More importantly, Kevin seemed genuinely interested in his answer. For the first time since this whole encounter began, Jake felt like he might have something valuable to contribute. Jake took a deep breath before answering Kevin's question. The entire bank seemed to be waiting for his response. Even customers who had been conducting their own business were now listening to the conversation. Well, Jake began carefully, I think the main problem is that we judge customers too quickly. We look at their clothes, their species, even the type of banking cards they use. We make decisions about how to treat them before we even know who they are. Kevin nodded encouragingly. Go on, like today with you, Jake continued, feeling more confident. I saw your old wallet and simple clothes, and I immediately assumed you didn't have much money. I didn't even try to give you good service. I was already thinking about getting you out of my line as fast as possible. Lisa spoke up from her chair. It's not just the tellers. I've watched our security protocols too. We pay extra attention to certain species because we think they're more likely to cause trouble. We barely notice others because we assume they're not important enough to worry about. Vexstar joined the conversation. I have observed this pattern as well. When draconian customers enter, all staff members become very attentive. When humans enter, the service level drops noticeably. This is not intentional discrimination, but it happens consistently. Klefmer looked uncomfortable as his own employees pointed out the bank's problems. These are operational issues that can be addressed through better training, he said defensively. Can they? Kevin asked. Let me tell you what I've discovered by looking into this bank's customer records. Everyone turned to stare at Kevin. Jake wondered how he could have accessed customer records, but then remembered that Kevin was probably one of the bank's most valuable clients. He likely had access to premium services that regular customers didn't know about. Over the past year, Kevin continued, this branch has lost 47 high-value human customers to other banks. These weren't people with small accounts. These were millionaires, successful business owners, and accomplished professionals. Jake felt his stomach drop. 47 wealthy customers lost in just 1 year. That represented millions of credits in lost business. Each of these customers cited poor service as their reason for leaving, Kevin explained. They felt unwelcome, disrespected, or ignored. Many of them mentioned specific incidents where they were treated badly because staff members made assumptions about their financial status. Klefmer's golden eyes widened. 47 customers? The regional office never told me we were losing that many accounts. Because you never asked, Kevin said simply. You never looked at the pattern. You never wondered why humans were closing their accounts and moving to competitors. Lisa leaned forward. Which banks are they going to? Mostly the Human Development Bank on Mars, Kevin replied. They've built their entire business model around providing excellent service to human customers. They don't judge people by their appearance. They train their staff to treat every customer with respect. Jake realized the implications immediately. They're taking away our human customers by giving them what we should have been giving them all along. Exactly, Kevin said. And it's not just individual customers. 3 major human-owned corporations have moved their business accounts there too. That's hundreds of millions of credits in lost revenue. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the main entrance. A group of well-dressed aliens had entered the bank, and several staff members were rushing to assist them. Jake recognized them as members of the Zenturian Trade Federation, one of the most powerful economic organizations in the galaxy. Dr. Reynolds, one of the Zenturians, called out as they approached. "What a pleasant surprise to see you here." Kevin stood up and shook hands with the lead Zenturian, whose name tag identified him as Trade Representative Zarthok. "Hello, Zarthok. What brings you to this branch?" "We were hoping to speak with you about your new communication project," Zarthok said smoothly. "We have a very generous offer to discuss." Jake noticed that all the bank staff were now paying attention to this conversation. Even customers from other parts of the bank had moved closer to listen. "What kind of offer?" Kevin asked politely. "Full funding for your research, unlimited resources, and exclusive licensing rights for the Zenturian Federation," Zarthok explained. "We're prepared to offer you 5 billion credits up front, plus 10% of all future profits." The entire bank went silent. 5 billion credits was more money than most people could imagine. It was enough to buy entire planets or fund the construction of massive space stations. "That's very generous," Kevin said calmly. "But I'm not interested in exclusive licensing arrangements." Zarthok looked surprised. "Perhaps you didn't understand the scope of our offer. 5 billion credits, Dr. Reynolds, plus ongoing royalties. This would make you one of the wealthiest beings in the galaxy." "I'm already one of the wealthiest beings in the galaxy," Kevin replied with a slight smile. "Money isn't my primary motivation." "Then, what is?" Zarthok asked, clearly frustrated. Kevin looked around the bank, his eyes settling on Jake, Lisa, and the other staff members who had been part of their earlier conversation. "I want to make sure this technology benefits everyone, not just the species that already have the most power. But the Zenturian Federation can guarantee the fastest development and deployment," Zarthok argued. "We have the infrastructure, the resources, the technical expertise. You also have a history of using new technology to maintain your economic advantages over smaller species," Kevin said calmly. "When you controlled the early FTL shipping routes, you used that monopoly to crush competitors and keep prices high." Zarthok's blue skin darkened slightly, which Jake had learned was a sign of anger in Zentarians. "We provided stability and order to galactic commerce. You provided profits for yourselves," Kevin corrected, "at the expense of everyone else." Jake was amazed by Kevin's composure. Here was one of the most powerful trade organizations in the galaxy offering him incredible wealth, and he was turning them down on principle. "Dr. Reynolds," Zarthok said, his voice becoming more formal and threatening, "I hope you'll reconsider. The Federation has ways of making business difficult for those who don't cooperate with us." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Everyone understood the implied threat. The Zenturian Trade Federation controlled shipping routes, banking networks, and communication systems across multiple star systems. They could make life very difficult for anyone who opposed them. Kevin's expression didn't change. "Are you threatening me, Zarthok?" "I'm simply pointing out the realities of galactic business," Zarthok replied smoothly. "The realities," Kevin said quietly, "are that my current quantum navigation patents generate more revenue in a single month than your entire organization profits in a year. The realities are that if I wanted to, I could shut down FTL travel throughout your territory by revoking your licensing agreements." Zarthok's confident expression faltered. Jake realized that Kevin held far more power than anyone had understood. The Zenturian Federation, for all their wealth and influence, depended on Kevin's technology for their entire business model. "The realities," Kevin continued, "are that I don't need your money, your resources, or your cooperation. But you need mine." The trade representative looked around the bank. seeming to notice for the first time that he was surrounded by witnesses to this conversation. His threat had backfired spectacularly. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Zarthak suggested. "I prefer transparent business dealings," Kevin said. "If you have something to offer, you can say it in front of everyone here." Zarthak realized he had lost this confrontation. "We'll be in touch, Dr. Reynolds," he said stiffly before leading his group out of the bank. As soon as the Zenturians left, excited chatter broke out throughout the bank. Jake had just witnessed Kevin Reynolds stand up to one of the most powerful organizations in the galaxy and win. "That was incredible," Lisa said in amazement. "I've never seen anyone talk to the Trade Federation like that." Kevin sat back down, looking slightly tired. "That's exactly the kind of behavior I'm trying to change. They think they can intimidate people into giving them what they want. They think power means they don't have to treat others with respect." Jake understood now why Kevin was so concerned about how the bank treated its customers. It wasn't just about individual rudeness. It was about a systemic problem where powerful groups felt entitled to treat others badly. "Dr. Reynolds," Jake said, "your communication technology project. Is that really about changing how power works in the galaxy?" Kevin smiled. "Partly, yes. Right now, the major powers control communication networks the same way they control everything else. They decide who gets access, who pays what prices, who gets priority service. But if communication became instantaneous and available to everyone," Lisa said, understanding dawning in her voice, "then smaller species and independent groups could compete on equal terms." "Now you're getting it," Kevin said. "Technology should level the playing field, not tilt it further toward those who already have advantages." Jake felt like he was beginning to understand Kevin's larger vision. This wasn't just about better banking service for humans. It was about challenging the entire structure of galactic society, and somehow Jake had found himself right in the middle of it all. 3 days after Kevin's visit to the bank, Jake Morrison arrived at work to find his world completely changed. The story of Dr. Kevin Reynolds confronting the Zenturian Trade Federation had spread throughout the galactic news networks. Everyone in the financial district was talking about the human scientist who had stood up to one of the most powerful organizations in space. But Jake's personal situation was even more complicated. He had received a message that morning requesting his presence at a corporate investigation meeting. The Intergalactic Financial Center's regional office wanted to discuss the incident with Kevin and the bank's treatment of human customers. Jake walked into the bank to find reporters from 3 different galactic news organizations waiting outside. Camera drones buzzed around the entrance, and he had to push through a crowd of journalists asking questions about Kevin Reynolds and discriminatory banking practices. Inside the bank, the atmosphere was tense. Klefmer was pacing behind the customer service area, his dark green scales looking almost black with stress. Other staff members were whispering to each other in small groups, clearly worried about their jobs. Lisa Chun approached Jake as soon as he reached his desk. "Jake, thank goodness you're here. Regional headquarters has been calling all morning. They want to talk to everyone who was involved in the Kevin Reynolds situation." "What kind of investigation?" Jake asked nervously. "Both kinds," Lisa replied grimly. "They're investigating possible discrimination against human customers, but they're also looking at the financial impact of losing high-value accounts." Before Jake could respond, a tall woman in an expensive business suit approached them. She had the pale skin and silver hair typical of someone from the Centauri colonies, and her confident walk suggested she held significant authority. "Mr. Morrison?" she asked. "I'm Director Sarah Wilson from the Regional Compliance Office. I need to speak with you about your interactions with Dr. Kevin Reynolds." Jake felt his stomach clench. "Yes, ma'am. Did I do something wrong?" "That's what we're trying to determine," Director Wilson replied. "Please join me in the conference room." As Jake followed her across the bank, He noticed that several other staff members were also being called for interviews. Vextar was already sitting in another conference room with a different investigator. Even some of the security guards were being questioned. Director Wilson activated a privacy shield around their table, ensuring that their conversation couldn't be overheard. She pulled out a holographic display and began reviewing what appeared to be recordings from the bank's security cameras. "Mr. Morrison, I want you to walk me through your entire interaction with Dr. Reynolds," she said. "Start from the moment he approached your desk." Jake recounted the events as honestly as he could. He admitted to making assumptions about Kevin based on his appearance. He described his shocked reaction to seeing Kevin's account balance. He explained the conversation that had followed and Kevin's questions about how other human customers were treated. Director Wilson listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on her display. When Jake finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied him carefully. "Mr. Morrison, are you aware that Dr. Reynolds has filed a formal complaint with the Galactic Banking Commission?" Jake's heart sank. "No, ma'am. What kind of complaint?" "Systematic discrimination against human customers at this branch," Director Wilson explained. "He's provided detailed documentation showing patterns of poor service, account closures, and preferential treatment based on species rather than account value." "Is that why he came to the bank that day?" Jake asked. "To gather evidence?" "Partly, yes," Director Wilson confirmed. "Dr. Reynolds has been conducting a quiet investigation of banking practices across the galaxy. Your branch isn't the only one with these problems, but the incident here was particularly well documented." Jake felt like the world was spinning around him. Kevin hadn't just been a customer making a withdrawal. He had been investigating their bank, and Jake had provided him with perfect evidence of discriminatory treatment. "Am I going to be fired?" Jake asked quietly. Director Wilson surprised him by shaking her head. "Actually, Mr. Morrison, Dr. Reynolds specifically requested that you not be penalized. He said you showed genuine remorse and a willingness to learn from the situation." Jake felt a wave of relief, followed immediately by confusion. He asked, "For me not to be fired?" "More than that," Director Wilson said. "He's recommended you for a promotion." "A promotion? I don't understand." Director Wilson activated another section of her holographic display, showing what appeared to be an official corporate document. "Dr. Reynolds has proposed the creation of a new position, Director of Customer Relations and Cultural Sensitivity. He suggested that you would be ideal for the role." Jake stared at the document in disbelief. "He wants me to be in charge of fixing the problems we discussed?" "Exactly. He believes that someone who has experienced these issues firsthand would be best positioned to address them systematically." Before Jake could respond, Director Wilson's communicator chimed with an urgent message. She read it quickly, and her expression became very serious. "Mr. Morrison, I'm afraid our conversation will have to continue later. There's been a significant development in Dr. Reynolds' situation." "What kind of development?" "He's announced his new communication technology project publicly, and he's revealed who his research partners are." Director Wilson led Jake out of the conference room and over to the bank's main information display, where a galactic news broadcast was playing. Kevin Reynolds appeared on the screen, standing in what looked like a research laboratory surrounded by scientists from multiple species. "Today I'm announcing the formation of the Independent Communication Research Consortium," Kevin was saying to the assembled reporters. "This project will develop instantaneous communication technology that will be freely available to all species and organizations, regardless of their political or economic status." The camera panned across Kevin's research team, and Jake was amazed by what he saw. There were humans, yes, but also scientists from species that Jake had barely heard of. Andromedan researchers from the outer colonies, independent inventors from the mining stations, even a few former employees of major corporations who had left to join Kevin's project. "The technology will be funded entirely through private investment," Kevin continued, and will be distributed through a non-profit organization to ensure that no single group can control access or pricing. The news anchor, a crystalline being, whose body sparkled with excitement, asked the obvious question, "Dr. Reynolds, the major galactic powers have offered you billions of credits for exclusive access to this technology. Why are you choosing this path instead?" Kevin smiled in the same gentle way he had smiled at Jake 3 days earlier. "Because technology should serve everyone, not just those who already have power. The current communication networks are controlled by a handful of organizations that decide who gets access and who doesn't. That needs to change." The broadcast cut to reactions from various galactic leaders. The Zentarian Trade Federation released a statement expressing disappointment with Kevin's decision. The Draconian Empire announced that they were reviewing their relationship with human scientific institutions. The Crystalline Collective, surprisingly, announced their support for Kevin's project and offered to contribute their own researchers to the consortium. But the most interesting reaction came from an unexpected source. Human organizations throughout the galaxy were pledging financial support for Kevin's project. The Human Development Bank announced a 50 million credit investment. Human-owned corporations were offering resources and expertise. Even individual humans were contributing to crowdfunding efforts that had raised millions of credits in just hours. "This is incredible," Lisa said, appearing at Jake's shoulder. "He's created a movement." Jake watched the broadcast in amazement. 3 days ago, Kevin had been just another customer at his desk. Now he was leading what appeared to be a revolution in galactic communications technology. "Mr. Morrison," Director Wilson said, "I think you should know that Dr. Reynolds has also announced something else. He's moving his personal banking to institutions that demonstrate commitment to fair treatment of all customers." "Is he closing his account here?" Jake asked. "Not yet. He's giving us 6 months to implement meaningful changes to our customer service policies. If we can prove that we've addressed the discrimination issues, he'll consider staying." Jake realized the enormous pressure this put on the bank. Losing Kevin's account would be financially devastating, but more importantly, it would signal to Kutu, other wealthy humans, that this institution couldn't be trusted. "Director Wilson," Jake said, "if Dr. Reynolds really wants me to lead these changes, I have some ideas about where to start. I'm listening." Jake took a deep breath, thinking about everything he had learned over the past few days. "We need to completely retrain our staff on customer service. Not just the obvious things like being polite, but understanding our own biases and assumptions. We need to review our account management practices to see how we've been treating different species differently." "Go on," Director Wilson encouraged. "We need to actively recruit customers from underserved communities." 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the main lobby of the Intergalactic Financial Center, watching his team prepare for what would be the most important day in the bank's history. Today, Dr. Kevin Reynolds would return to evaluate the changes they had implemented and decide whether to keep his accounts with their institution. The transformation had been remarkable. The lobby now displayed welcome messages in 47 different languages and species communication methods. Staff members wore new badges indicating their cultural sensitivity training completion. Most importantly, the atmosphere felt completely different, warmer, more welcoming, more respectful. Jake's new role as Director of Customer Relations and Cultural Sensitivity had been challenging but rewarding. Over the past 6 months, he had worked with every department to identify and eliminate discriminatory practices. The results spoke for themselves. Human customer accounts had increased by 200%, and customer satisfaction scores had reached record highs across all species. "Nervous?" Lisa Chun asked as she approached. She now served as Jake's assistant director, having been promoted from her security position after demonstrating excellent insights into customer service issues. "Terrified," Jake admitted honestly. "Everything we've worked for comes down to today. The changes had been extensive and sometimes difficult. 3 employees, including 1 supervisor, had been terminated for refusing to adapt to the new customer service standards. Klethmer, the former branch manager, had been transferred to a different location after multiple incidents showed he couldn't change his discriminatory attitudes. The bank had hired a new manager, Maria Santos, a human with 20 years of experience. In multicultural customer service at exactly 10 o'clock, the bank's front doors opened and Kevin Reynolds walked in. He looked exactly the same as he had 6 months ago: simple clothes, old wallet, modest appearance. But now every staff member in the building knew exactly who he was and what he represented. "Good morning, Dr. Reynolds," Maria Santos greeted him warmly. "Welcome back to our branch. I'm Maria Santos, the new branch manager." Kevin smiled and shook her hand. "Nice to meet you, Maria. I'm here to see Jake Morrison, if he's available." "Of course," Maria replied. "Jake has been looking forward to your visit." As Kevin walked toward Jake's new office, something beautiful happened. Every staff member he passed offered genuine, respectful greetings. Not because he was famous or wealthy, but because they had learned to treat all customers with dignity. Jake watched several employees helping other customers with the same level of attention and care, regardless of the customer's appearance or species. "Jake," Kevin said as he entered the office, "the atmosphere here feels completely different." "Thank you," Jake replied, standing to shake Kevin's hand. "We've worked hard to make these changes real, not just cosmetic." Kevin sat down and looked around Jake's office, which displayed certificates from cultural sensitivity courses, customer service excellence awards, and photos from community outreach events. "Tell me about what you've accomplished." Jake pulled up a presentation he had prepared, but Kevin held up his hand. "Actually, let me experience it firsthand first. I'd like to conduct some test transactions and observe your staff in action." For the next hour, Kevin moved through the bank like any other customer. He opened a small savings account, applied for a credit increase, and asked questions about investment services. Jake watched nervously as Kevin interacted with different staff members. The results were everything Jake had hoped for. Vextar, the Centaurian teller who had laughed at human customers 6 months ago, now treated Kevin with the same professional courtesy he showed everyone else. The security team, led by Lisa, monitored all customers fairly without profiling based on species or appearance. Even the cleaning staff had been trained to greet customers politely as they worked. But the real test came when a young Andromedan artist approached Kevin's old teller window, now staffed by Alex Rodriguez, a recent hire who had been specifically trained in Jake's new customer service protocols. The artist looked nervous and uncertain, clutching a small bag that probably contained all their possessions. Their clothes were worn and patched, and they seemed intimidated by the bank's impressive technology and alien customers. Jake held his breath as Alex greeted the young Andromedan with a warm smile. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" I need to open an account," the artist said quietly in heavily accented Galactic Standard. "But I only have 50 credits to deposit." "50 credits is a perfect amount to start with," Alex replied enthusiastically. "Let me help you find the account type that works best for your needs." Jake felt tears forming in his eyes as he watched Alex treat the poor artist with exactly the same respect and attention he would give to the wealthiest customer. This was what Kevin had been talking about 6 months ago. This was what real change looked like. Kevin watched the interaction too, and Jake saw approval in his eyes. When the artist finished their transaction and left with a smile, Kevin turned to Jake with genuine admiration. "That," Kevin said quietly, "was beautiful." They returned to Jake's office, where Kevin finally agreed to review the formal presentation about the bank's changes. Jake showed him the statistics: increased customer satisfaction, growing accounts across all species, improved employee retention, and positive feedback from community organizations. But the numbers aren't the most important thing, Jake said. The most important thing is that we've created a culture where everyone feels welcome and respected. Kevin nodded thoughtfully. What was the biggest challenge you faced? Changing attitudes, Jake replied without hesitation. Some people thought that treating customers equally meant lowering our standards. They didn't understand that respect and professionalism should be the standard for everyone, not special privileges for a few. And how did you overcome that? By showing them that good customer service actually improves business results, Jake explained. When you treat people well, they bring their friends and family. They recommend your services. They stay loyal even when competitors offer them deals. Kevin smiled. You've learned something important about human nature. People respond to how they're treated, regardless of their species or background. There was a knock on Jake's office door. Lisa entered with a tablet displaying urgent news from the Galactic Communication Networks. Jake, Dr. Reynolds, you need to see this, she said excitedly. The screen showed a news report about Kevin's communication technology project. After 6 months of development, the Independent Communication Research Consortium had achieved a breakthrough. They had successfully demonstrated instantaneous communication across a distance of 50 light-years with 0 delay. Dr. Reynolds, the news anchor, was saying, when will this technology be available to the public? Kevin's recorded response played on the screen. We're beginning implementation immediately. The first networks will be activated in star systems that have been underserved by current communication infrastructure. Our goal is to ensure that distance and economic status no longer determine who can communicate effectively across the galaxy. Jake realized the implications immediately. Kevin's technology would revolutionize not just communication, but commerce, education, healthcare, and every other aspect of galactic society. Small communities that had been isolated by distance and cost would suddenly have the same access to information and opportunities as major population centers. Congratulations, Jake said sincerely. This is going to change everything. It already has, Kevin replied. The announcement this morning triggered partnership requests from over 200 organizations. Universities want to share research instantly. Medical facilities want to consult on difficult cases in real time. Even small businesses want to participate in galactic commerce. Kevin stood up and walked to Jake's window, which looked out over the busy financial district. But you know what makes me proudest? 40% of the partnership requests came from human organizations. 6 months ago, humans were considered second-class participants in the galactic economy. Now they're leading innovation in multiple fields. Because someone believed in them, Jake said. Because they believed in themselves, Kevin corrected. They just needed someone to give them a chance to prove their worth. Kevin turned back to face Jake. Which brings me to my decision about my banking arrangements. Jake felt his heart racing. Everything his team had worked for came down to this moment. I've decided to not only keep my accounts here, Kevin said, but to significantly expand them. I'm moving the primary funding accounts for the Communication Research Consortium to this branch. Jake's relief was overwhelming. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, we won't let you down. I know you won't, Kevin replied. But more importantly, I'm recommending this branch to every human organization that's partnering with our communication project. You've proven that it's possible to change institutional culture and create genuine equality. As Kevin prepared to leave, he paused at Jake's door. Jake, I want you to remember something. 6 months ago, you made assumptions about me based on my appearance. But when you realized your mistake, you didn't just apologize, you committed to making sure it never happened again to anyone else. You taught me that every person deserves respect, Jake replied.